Hi everyone, today we're going to be looking at the fight or flight response, and for this you need to know what is the fight or flight response, what happens when we're in the fight or flight response, and the role of adrenaline more specifically in this response. So the fight or flight response is obviously us experiencing a threat or a stressful situation and our body dealing with that in a specific way. And it can do that in two different ways. It can fight, i.e. attack, or we can run away, so flight. And what happens is that our nervous system is changing, and it tells the endocrine system is told to release particular hormones that will help us to keep alert, such as adrenaline. And it's evolved as a survival mechanism. It's for ourselves to protect ourselves against other animals so that we can protect ourselves and our family and therefore survive and pass on our genes. So think the evolutionary approach, think Darwin. So there are several things that happen and you need to be able to explain this process. And the first thing is always a threat or a stressor is perceived. So we see something, we hear something that puts us on edge. Like if we were walking down a dark alley at night and we heard footsteps behind us, then that is us hearing or perceiving a threat of some kind, okay? And from this moment, very quickly what happens is a message is sent to our hypothalamus, and it prepares our body, our sympathetic nervous system, to get into action and to start releasing particular hormones and start making our body and brain more alert. So the body switches off the parasympathetic state, turning on the sympathetic state, and begins the process of preparing the body for rapid action. So it starts to send particular signals around the body, including specifically to the adrenal medulla, which releases adrenaline. And that has many effects on our body, including things like our heart rate going up, we sweat more in order to make sure that we're staying cool and therefore can help and fight. It also decreases our digestion system because we don't need that right now. And just make sure that we are ready and prepared to fight. So that's the role specifically that adrenaline has. So it increases our heart rate, our breathing rate, etc. And then our parasympathetic nervous system is activated when we perceive that the threat has gone. So afterwards, when we realise that the threat has gone or that the footsteps were just our friend behind us, the parasympathetic nervous system is activated and switched back on. And that helps our body to return to normal. So our heart rate goes back down, our breathing goes back down, our digestion begins again. And that means that we can calm back down. It's really important for the exam that you don't forget two important things. One, don't forget that the threat or stressor is perceived, because often we forget this because it's in the answer, it's in the scenario. We forget to say what the threat or stressor is. And secondly, don't forget that our body returns to normal afterwards. Again, people tend to forget that at the end and they're just talking about the fight or flight response, but forget what happens after the fight or flight response, the end of the fight or flight response, which is that our body returns to normal. Now, the problem with the fight or flight response is that it was adaptive. It was helpful to us when we needed to flee from a lion or move out of the path for an oncoming car. Now is probably the main thing that it would be helpful for. But it's also triggered all the time. Whenever we're stressed and we're worrying about something, our fight or flight response has been triggered. So when we're worrying about exams or sending an email or sending a message to someone, it's on. And that's causing us a lot of stress. And that puts a lot of stress on our body as well, because there's going to be an increased blood pressure, and that can damage our blood vessels and eventually lead to things like heart disease and stuff. So it's not very helpful for us nowadays. So we haven't really adapted to stop this stress or to stop this response, or recognise when we need the response and when we don't. We do need it when we've accidentally stepped out into the road and there's a car, or we need to swerve out the way because someone stepped into the road. But we don't need it on an everyday basis when we're stressing about our exams or stressing about a piece of work or worrying about putting our hand up in class. So when you're writing this as an exam question, it's really important that you identify, as I said, the threat or stressful situation that triggers the response. And you need to make sure that you specifically talk about the role of adrenaline. So as an example here, it says that the fight or flight response involves increased heart rate, which is why a person feels like their heart was racing, and it stops their digestion, and this is why people feel like they have a dry mouth. So really explaining the effects of these. So make sure you've got a couple of examples like the ones below written down about the effects that this has on the body, specifically the role of adrenaline. I hope that was helpful.